Your mind isn't broken. It's just misunderstood. The thoughts that exhaust you, the patterns that confuse you, the emotions you hide, they all come from somewhere. In the next 2 hours, we won't fight your mind. We'll listen to it. Through subtle psychological truths and quiet paradoxes, you'll discover how your deepest struggles are often hidden survival strategies, and how understanding them can unlock peace. Let these words rewire your thinking as your body relaxes and your old beliefs gently dissolve. You don't have to change overnight, just enough to see yourself differently. Welcome to 2 hours of mental clarity, spoken softly, to help you think less and sleep more. The power pause. Have you ever noticed how silence can feel louder than words? Let's begin with this strange truth. Doing nothing can often say everything. Imagine this. You ask someone a deep question. Something like, "Why did you lie about that?" Or, "What are you hiding?" Then you say nothing. No follow-up. No tone. Just silence. Died at first. It feels empty. But then something shifts. That silence begins to speak. Not to you, but to them. Their brain scrambles to fill the void. Why aren't they saying anything? What are they thinking? Do I need to explain more? That silence becomes pressure. It builds, it stretches, it becomes uncomfortable. And then, almost every time they speak, they defend, they confess, they share more than they intended to. You didn't force anything. You simply paused. And in that pause, you controlled the entire moment. This is called the power pause, and it's a mental paradox. We're taught that silence is weakness, that control comes from explaining, persuading, talking. But this flips it around. The less you say, the more powerful your presence becomes. Why? Does it work? Because people hate uncertainty. Our minds crave closure. When someone asks a strong question but says nothing more, our brain races to resolve that tension. It starts projecting emotions, shame, guilt, fear into that quiet space. And in that panic, we reveal things. Think of silence not as absence, but as intention. It's a mirror. It reflects the other person's thoughts right back at them. And in that reflection, they often reveal truth you never even asked for. Even more fascinating, the more silent you are, the louder they become. The less you try to push, the more they pull themselves into the truth. Like fishing, you don't yank, you wait. You let the line tighten. The pause is that tension, and tension always seeks release. This doesn't mean being passive. A power pause is active, focused, surgical. You're not avoiding speaking because you have nothing to say. You're creating space for them to say what they've been hiding. In a society addicted to noise, texts, voices, chatter, silence becomes rebellion. And rebellion gets attention. And negotiation. Say your price, then pause. In relationships, ask, "Is that how you truly feel?" And pause. In conflict, say, "That's not what I heard." And pause. Let them wrestle with it. Let the discomfort do the work. It's not manipulation. It's clarity. So the next time you want the truth, don't chase it. Don't overtalk. Don't force. Just ask. And pause. There's a voice inside us that doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you, you'll finally feel better once you achieve this. It dangles the idea of happiness like a prize at the end of some marathon. So you run. And run? Then run. This voice tells you, I'll be happy when I lose weight. I'll be happy when I make more money. I'll be happy when I find love. I'll be happy when I move away. And because the voice sounds reasonable, even hopeful, you listen. You wait. You tie your sense of peace to a future you haven't even reached yet. And in doing so, you push the present moment out of your hands. This is the trap. This is the I'll be happy when illusion. You see, the human mind is always seeking completion. It wants closure. It wants to arrive. So it creates milestones that promise emotional satisfaction, goals that appear like finishing lines. And every time we get close to one, the mind moves the line a little further. You reach the destination, but there's no real celebration. Nah, internal shift. Just the next craving, the next, if only, the next condition for happiness. Why does this happen? Because the brain is wired to survive, not to feel satisfied. It evolved to scan for threats, problems, and incompletions. So even when things go well, your mind will search for the next issue to solve, believing that once that's hen, then you'll be happy. But the goalpost never stops shifting. The mind adapts to good news quickly. This is called hedonic adaptation. That big raise, you'll celebrate it for a day, maybe a week, and then you'll want more. That new relationship, eventually you'll begin to find flaws. That dream, move to a new city, you'll settle in and start dreaming of somewhere else. You might convince yourself, I'm just ambitious. But ambition without presence becomes a form of suffering. You end up living in a mental waiting room, always anticipating the next chapter, while never really reading the one you're in. And here's the strange truth. When you constantly chase happiness, you teach your brain that now is not enough. And the more you reinforce that idea, the more disconnected you feel from your actual life. So what can you do? You learn to unhook your joy from outcomes, unhook your self-worth from achievements, unhook your identity from accomplishments. This doesn't mean giving up on goals. It means realizing that happiness isn't hidden at the end of some external journey. It's buried in the internal relationship you have with the now. Let's test something. Think of a time when you actually felt happy. Really go there. Were you achieving something? Maybe, but more likely you were fully immersed, present, not grasping for more. You were in it. That's the key. Fulfillment doesn't live in a finished goal. It lives in a felt moment. A conversation that made you laugh. A morning where you slowed down. A night where you looked at the sky and remembered you're alive. But those moments can't be accessed while you're spreading toward a future you've been convinced is the real life. So try this instead. Say, I choose to feel enough now. Say, I can enjoy this chapter even if it's not perfect. Say, my life is not a checklist. It's a series of breaths I don't want to miss. Let happiness be a companion, not a reward. Let it live in the process, not just the outcome. Because every time you say, I'll be happy when, you push away the very thing you're hoping to feel. So ask yourself, what if you stopped waiting? The I'll be happy when illusion. You've probably said it 200 times. I'll be happy when I make more money. I'll feel at peace when I lose the weight. I'll finally be free when I find the right person, the right job, the right moment. And every time you say it, it feels reasonable. Like happiness is just around the corner, hiding just beyond the next achievement or life event. But here's the quiet trap. That moment you're waiting for, it keeps moving. You get the job, and then it's the promotion. You lose the weight, and now it's your appearance. You find the relationship, and now you're worried about losing it. This is the "I'll be happy" one illusion. The belief that happiness is a destination, a checkpoint on the road of life. But the problem is the road keeps stretching, and happiness always seems to be a few more miles ahead. You become a traveler without a rival. You spend your days striving, thinking that maybe if you just improve enough, achieve enough, fix enough, you'll finally feel peace. But what if the truth is this? Happiness isn't waiting for you at the end of the path. It's hidden inside the way you walk it. Let's go deeper. The illusion forms early, when we're taught to associate worth with results, gold stars, report cards, likes, metrics, outcomes. We learn that joy must be earned, that rest must be justified, that love is conditional. So of course we keep pushing. Of course we keep chasing. But this chase has a cost. It teaches you that now this moment isn't enough, that something is always missing. And worst of all, it robs you of the joy that's already here. You begin to delay life itself. You postpone joy. You say things like, "I'll slow down once this project ends. I'll take care of myself when things settle down. I'll be happy when..." And then years pass, and you realize the destination never came because it was never real. Here's what's real. Happiness isn't something you achieve. It's something you allow. It's not earned, it's accessed. Not through perfection, but through presence. It shows up in the small things, the quiet breath you take between thoughts, the moment you laugh at your own mistake, the coffee that tastes good, the sun on your skin, the stillness in your chest when you're no longer performing. It's already here, if you let it be. So ask yourself gently, what if I stopped postponing joy? What if I stopped linking happiness to outcomes I can't fully control? What if I made peace with where I am, even as I grow? Because yes, you can have goals. Yes, you can want more. But don't tie your happiness to a moving target. Don't make joy a prize you only hand to yourself once you've crossed the imaginary finish line. There is no finish line. There's just now, and the more you can soften into it, the more you realize you never needed to wait for happiness. You just needed to pause long enough to feel it. Overthinking every interaction. You walk away from a conversation, and at first it seems fine. But then your mind starts rewinding it. Did I say something weird? Why did I laugh like that? Did they look uncomfortable when I said that one thing? What if I came across as awkward or needy or fake? This is what overthinking every interaction feels like. A loop that won't stop spinning. It's like your brain becomes a courtroom, putting your words and actions on trial long after the moment has passed. You replay the same 2-minute conversation over and over for the next 3 hours. And the more you analyze it, the worse it seems. You start inventing problems that were never even there. Why does this happen? Because your brain is trying to protect you. It thinks, if I can find what went wrong, I can prevent future rejection, embarrassment, or shame. It's a survival tactic, a mental attempt to edit reality after it's already happened. But in trying to protect you, overthinking actually starts hurting you. It drains your energy, kills your confidence, and makes you second-guess your own existence. Every interaction becomes a puzzle. Every silence becomes a threat. Every facial expression becomes a signal of judgment. Here's the truth. Most people aren't analyzing you the way you think they are. They're too busy thinking about themselves, their own anxieties, their own words, their own insecurities. Just like you, the spotlight you think is on you, it's actually on everyone else too. We're all starring in our own internal movie, convinced everyone else is the audience. This is called the spotlight effect, the illusion that people are paying way more attention to us than they really are. In reality, that awkward sentence you're obsessing over, they've already forgotten it. Still, the mind can't let go. Why? Because overthinking offers the illusion of control. If you can dissect every word, maybe you can manage how others see you. If you can rehearse every conversation afterward, maybe you'll be better next time. But what you're actually doing is robbing yourself of peace, trading presence for imaginary control. So, how do you break the loop? Start with this truth. Your thoughts are not always facts. Just because your mind is highlighting a moment doesn't mean it mattered. Your brain is a storyteller, and sometimes it tells horror stories about completely ordinary situations. Instead of interrogating every moment, practice acceptance. Tell yourself, maybe I said something weird. That's okay. People forget. I'm human. Give yourself permission to be imperfect in public. Because overthinking thrives on the false belief that you must perform flawlessly to be accepted. But in reality, authenticity is magnetic, not perfection. Try this mental shift. Whenever your brain starts replaying a conversation, interrupt the cycle with this question. What would I say to a friend who was thinking this? You'd probably say, you're overthinking. It's not a big deal. They probably didn't even notice. So why is that advice so hard to give to yourself? Because overthinkers often hold themselves to stricter standards than they hold anyone else. Here's what's more helpful. Learn to tolerate uncertainty. You might never know what someone really thought. You might never get feedback. And that's okay. Not everything needs closure. Not everything needs correction. Some conversations are just moments. Some interactions are just small ripples. Let them pass. Because when you obsess over being seen the right way, you disconnect from your real self. You become a version of you shaped by imaginary judgments. And ironically, the more you try to manage how others see you, the less authentic you become. So breathe. Let it go. You don't need to rewatch every social scene like it's a mistake. Real. You were there. You showed up. You were real. That's more than enough. The endless comparison loop. It starts subtly. You're scrolling through your feed. Someone's buying a house. Someone's getting engaged. Someone else just got promoted again. You don't even realize it, but your mind starts calculating. How am I doing compared to them? Should I be further ahead? Why does their life seem so perfect and mine so average? This is the trap of the endless comparison loop. A mental spiral that turns other people's highlight reels into a measure of your self-worth. At first, it seems harmless, maybe even motivating. You think, I want to do better too. But the longer you compare, the heavier it gets. Because you're not just seeing someone's success, you're imagining their happiness, their ease, their confidence. You're filling in the blanks with fantasy. You see the picture, but not the pain behind it. You see the announcement, but not the anxiety that followed. You see the win, but not the years of invisible struggle. You're comparing your full, messy, behind-the-scenes life to someone else's curated version of theirs, and it's not a fair fight. Your brain doesn't care, though. It starts whispering, "You're behind. You're not enough. Everyone else has it figured out." And that whisper becomes a roar. It drowns out your accomplishments. It makes you blind to your own progress. It convinces you that your life is somehow missing something critical. But here's the truth. Comparison is the thief of gratitude. And without gratitude, even the most beautiful parts of your life start to feel like burdens. So why do we keep doing it? Because the brain is wired to write, to assess, to evaluate our place in the social hierarchy. In ancient times, this helped us survive. But today, it traps us in a constant scoreboard of status, one that never turns off. And with technology, that scoreboard is 24/7. Social media isn't just a window, it's a magnifying glass. It makes other people's wins feel louder and closer than they actually are. The irony? While you're comparing your life to theirs, they might be doing the exact same thing to you. Everyone's pretending they're okay, while secretly wondering if they're falling behind. This isn't about deleting apps or pretending you don't care. It's about changing the story your mind tells when you see someone else's success. Instead of thinking, "Why not me?" try thinking, "Their journey is not mine." Instead of feeling threatened, try feeling inspired, not to become them, but to keep becoming you. Because here's what comparison does. It shrinks your world. It replaces your vision with someone else's. It makes you chase goals but don't even belong to you. And worst of all, it blinds you to your own path. What if the version of success you're measuring yourself against doesn't even match your values? What if the person you're envying is envying someone else? What if the very life you're rushing through just to keep up is a life you'd be grateful for if you slowed down? You don't need to win the race. You just need to make peace with your lane. You are not ahead. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to learn what you need to learn next. So the next time that comparison starts spinning, pause. Ground yourself. Remember, your timeline is not broken. Your life is not late. And someone else's win is not your loss. Assuming everyone thinks like you're upset because someone didn't text back. You assume they're ignoring you on purpose. You do something kind for someone, and they don't return the favor, and you feel confused, maybe even betrayed. You hear about a decision someone made, and you think, "Why would they do that? I'd never react that way." This is a cognitive trap most people don't even realize they fall into. Assuming everyone thinks like you. It feels innocent, even rational, to believe that others process emotions, make decisions, and interpret events the same way you do. But this belief quietly sabotages communication, relationships, empathy, and peace of mind. Because here's the truth. They don't think like you. Not even close. Every person you meet is operating with a completely different mental operating system, built from their own upbringing, trauma, values, insecurities, environment. personality, and emotional bandwidth. What seems obvious to you might be invisible to them. What would hurt you might not even register for someone else. What you consider respectful might not align with their idea of the same thing. And yet, we constantly overlay our worldview onto others. We think, if I were in their shoes, I'd never act like that. But you're not in their shoes. You're in yours. You're using your filters, your memories, your standards. That's not empathy. That's projection. And projection distorts reality. It replaces curiosity with assumption. This is why people get hurt over things that were never meant to be hurtful. It's why relationships break down over silent expectations. It's why someone's rude behavior might actually just be the result of a different communication style, not malice. Let's go deeper. Your brain likes efficiency. So when someone behaves in a way that doesn't make sense to you, the brain fills in the blanks using your logic. It creates a story. They didn't call me back because they don't care, but maybe they were anxious or overwhelmed or didn't know how to respond. Or maybe they're just different. Assuming people think like you creates resentment. You hold them to an emotional rule book they've never read. You feel disappointed when they don't act how you would, and slowly those silent expectations build into silent frustrations. But here's the mental shift. Difference doesn't mean disrespect. Just because someone doesn't react the way you would doesn't mean they're wrong. And just because they don't value what you value doesn't mean they lack character. People live in entirely different emotional landscapes. For some, speaking up is easy. For others, it feels like an earthquake. Some people grew up being rewarded for honesty. Others grew up being punished for it. Some people withdraw when hurt. Others confront. Some need time to process. Others speak in the moment. The more you assume similarity, the more you set yourself up for emotional misunderstanding. But when you accept this truth, that others are wired differently, you unlock real empathy. Instead of asking, why would they do that? Ask, what makes sense in their world? Instead of labeling their behavior, explore their background. Instead of expecting reciprocity in the exact way you give it, accept that love, respect, and care come in different languages. This doesn't mean you tolerate harmful behavior or excuse bad treatment. It means you stop internalizing misalignment as personal failure. You stop turning someone else's difference into a mirror of your own worth. You also release yourself from the burden of being understood by everyone. Because if people don't think like you, they might not fully get you either. And that's okay. Peace comes not from forcing others to match your mind, but from learning how to connect with theirs, even when it works differently. Don't. So the next time someone acts in a way you can't relate to, resist the urge to judge. Pause the story your mind is writing. And instead of saying, I'd never do that, say what they did. And maybe there's more to it than I see. That simple shift might be the beginning of deeper connection, or at the very least, peace. The productivity guilt trap. You wake up and scroll your phone for 20 minutes. You think, I should have started the day earlier. You take a break in the afternoon, and a voice inside whispers, you don't deserve to rest yet. You finish the day and still feel like you didn't do enough, even if you did everything on your list. This is the quiet voice that haunts millions The productivity guilt trap. We live in a culture that glorifies being busy, where hustle is praised and rest feels like weakness. Somewhere along the way, productivity became a new form of morality. The more you do, the more worthy you must be. Right? Wrong. This trap convinces you that your value comes from output, that you are only as good as your to-do list, that slowing down is laziness, that rest must be earned, and it's exhausting. You could have a full, productive day and still feel like a failure, because productivity guilt doesn't care about reality. It only cares about more goals, more speed, more results. The dangerous part? It's sneaky. It disguises itself as ambition, responsibility, even discipline. But beneath it lies a deeper belief. If I stop moving, I'll fall behind. If I stop doing, I'll stop being enough. Let's look closer. This mindset often comes from childhood. Conditioning. Maybe you were praised only when you achieved something. Maybe you saw adults around you constantly working and internalized it as normal. Maybe you feared being seen as lazy, so you overcompensated by always performing. Whatever the root, the result is the same. Discomfort with stillness. You sit down to relax and your brain scans for things you should be doing. You can't watch a show without guilt. You can't take a day off without thinking of all the ways you're falling short. This is not ambition. It's anxiety in disguise. So what's the cost? Chronic stress, burnout, emotional disconnection, a sense that life is always happening, just beyond reach because you're too busy chasing the next thing. Worse, productivity guilt makes you resent yourself. You become your own relentless boss, one who never approves, never says, "Good job," never lets you clock out. And ironically, the more you push under pressure, the less creative, less focused, and less joyful you become. Your brain wasn't built for non-stop performance. It needs pause. It needs recovery. It needs permission to just be. So how do you step out of the trap? Start by redefining worth. You are not your tasks. You are not your output. You are not a machine. Your value is not tied to how much you produce, how fast you finish, or how busy you appear. Say that again. Your value is not tied to productivity. Next. Reframe. Rest. Rest is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. Breaks don't slow you down. They recharge your mind to go further. More sustainable. Why not think of high-performance athletes? They train intensely, but they also rest intentionally. Without recovery, performance drops. The same is true for your mind. Now try this. When the guilt creeps in, respond with a different voice. Say, "I'm allowed to rest even if everything isn't done." Say, "Doing nothing is doing something. It's taking care of me." Say, "My worth doesn't disappear when I pause." The hardest part is trusting that rest doesn't mean failure. That stillness won't make your life collapse. That you're not falling behind. You're just breathing. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do is let yourself be human. Because at the end of your life, you won't look back and say, "I wish I checked more boxes." You'll remember how it felt to be alive. So take the break. Close the laptop. Walk slowly. Forgive yourself for not doing more. And remember, your worth is not measured in hours. It's measured in presence, peace, and how gently you can hold yourself, even when you rest. The I always fail narrative. You try something new, and it doesn't go as planned. You apply for a job and get no response. You open up to someone, and they don't respond the way you hoped. And then the voice in your head starts whispering, "Of course this happened. It always ends this way. I always fail." This is the birth of a dangerous pattern. The I always fail narrative, a mental loop that convinces you that setbacks aren't events. They're personal truths. And once your brain starts believing this narrative, it doesn't just look for failure, it expects it. It becomes the lens through which you see yourself, your life, and your potential. Every mistake feels like proof. Every rejection feels like confirmation. Every win feels like a fluke. Here's the paradox. Failure isn't what breaks people. It's the story they build around it. Failure is part of growth. But when you interpret it as identity, that's when it becomes heavy, even toxic. Let's go deeper. The I always fail mindset doesn't come out of nowhere. It's usually built slowly over time, layer by layer, from repeated experiences, maybe in childhood, maybe from one painful betrayal, or maybe from dozens of tiny moments where things didn't go as hoped. Eventually, your mind stops saying, "That didn't work out," and starts saying, "I never work out." It becomes personal. And once that shift happens, you stop trying, not because you're lazy, but because deep down, you're trying to protect yourself. You think, if I don't try, I can't fail. But that's a quiet form of self-abandonment. You end up rejecting yourself before the world has a chance to. The problem is the mind seeks consistency with its beliefs. So if you believe you always fail, you'll subconsciously sabotage your own success. You'll procrastinate. You'll aim low. You'll give up early. And when things fall apart, as they naturally do sometimes, it becomes more fuel for the story. You turn normal challenges into evidence that you were never good enough in the first place. But here's what the story doesn't show you. The times you kept going. The moments you were scared but still showed up. The quiet resilience you built when nobody was watching. Because the story only remembers the crash, not the climb. So how do you rewrite it? Start by separating identity from experience. Just because something failed doesn't mean you are a failure. Just because something ended doesn't mean you're the reason it broke. Just because someone didn't see your value doesn't mean you're worthless. Your brain clings to patterns, but you can create new ones. Instead of saying, "I always fail," try saying, "I've had hard moments and I'm still learning." Next, challenge the word always. Always is a trap word. Extreme, absolute, fence. Nothing happens always. You don't fail every time, but your brain erases the nuance to keep the narrative simple. So introduce nuance. Remind yourself, I've failed sometimes, but I've also grown. I've struggled, but I've succeeded in ways I didn't give myself credit for. Finally, practice self-compassion. Because often, beneath the "I always fail" story is a deeper wound. The fear of being unlovable if you don't succeed. The fear of being seen as weak. The fear that if you admit failure, you'll lose your worth. But here's the truth. Failure doesn't make you less worthy. It makes you human. And ironically, the more compassion you give yourself during failure, the more likely you are to rise from it. So the next time you hear that voice, I always fail,
Pause.
ask yourself, is that true? Or is that fear speaking? And then choose to respond with a better story. A story that makes space for effort, for growth, for bounce backs, for being more than just your wins or losses. Because your life is not a highlight reel of perfection. It's a messy, beautiful journey. And failure isn't the end of your story. It's often the page right before the breakthrough. The sunk cost fallacy. You've been in a relationship for years, but deep down you know it's not working. You stay at a job you've outgrown because you've already put so much into it. You keep watching a terrible movie because you're halfway through and you don't want to waste the time you've already spent. This is the mental trap known as the sunk cost fallacy, the idea that the more time, money, or energy you've invested into something, the harder it is to walk away, even when continuing makes you miserable. On the surface, it feels logical. You think, I can't quit now, I've already invested so much. If I leave, it means everything I did before was a waste. But here's the paradox. The more you cling to something that no longer serves you, the more time you actually waste. You end up sacrificing your present and your future to justify your past. Let's break it down. The sunk cost is what's already gone. The hours, energy, money, or emotion you've poured in. It's unrecoverable. You can't get it back no matter what decision you make now. But your brain doesn't like that reality. We're wired to seek closure. We want our investments to feel meaningful. So we convince ourselves to keep pushing, not because it's right, but because the alternative feels too painful. Admitting it's time to let go. And that's the emotional core of this fallacy. Loss aversion. It's not just about fear of failure. It's fear of acknowledging that your effort didn't create the outcome you wanted. That maybe, just maybe, you're better off starting over even if it means letting go of everything you've already put in. But here's the truth. Holding on just because you've held on is not strength. It's stagnation. You deserve more than a life filled with, well, I've come this far. You deserve a life that feels aligned now. Let's say you're in a business you no longer believe in, but you've been building it for years. Every day feels heavier than the last, but the idea of quitting feels like betrayal to yourself, to your time, to everyone who believed in you. So you stay, not because it's right, but because leaving feels like losing. But what if you're not losing? What if letting go is finally choosing yourself? The past doesn't need to justify the future. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is cut your losses, not because you fail, but because you've grown enough to know better. Ask yourself this: if I hadn't already invested anything, would I still choose this today? That's the question that cuts through the fog. That's the clarity you've been avoiding. If the answer is no, then you're not staying out of passion. You're staying out of guilt, fear, and false obligation. And nothing beautiful grows from that. Life changes. People change. Your needs evolve. And what once made sense may no longer fit. That's not failure. That's growth. The best decisions aren't always the most loyal to the past. They're the most honest about the present. You owe it to yourself to walk away from the weight of unreturnable investment. You owe it to your future self to say, this no longer serves me, and that's reason enough. Because real strength is not in clinging tighter. It's in knowing when to release. So whether it's a job, a habit, a project, or a relationship, don't stay just because you've stayed. Don't keep going just because you've already gone far. Look ahead. And remember, time already spent is never the reason to spend more. Freedom isn't found in salvaging what's lost. It's in choosing what still has the power to grow. Seeking closure from people who can't give it. You want an explanation. You want them to acknowledge what they did. You want them to apologize, to take responsibility, to meet you in the pain they caused. You want a conversation, the right one, where everything finally makes sense. This is the craving for closure, the invisible thread you keep tugging at, hoping it'll untangle the knot in your chest. But here's the harsh truth. Sometimes the people who hurt you can't give you the closure you seek, not because you don't deserve it, but because they're not capable of giving it. This is one of the hardest things to accept. You replay what happened over and over, imagining different endings. You think, if they just understood how they made me feel, or if I could just talk to them one more time, maybe they'd finally get it. But they don't get it, or they refuse to. Or they see the story so differently that no amount of explaining could ever make it align with your truth. And that hurts, because you're not just grieving what happened, you're grieving the lack of resolution. You're left with open loops. The conversation that ended too soon, the apology that never came, the goodbye that felt too empty, the silence that said everything and nothing. Your mind searches for answers that don't exist. You think if you just understand why, you'll feel better. But understanding isn't always what brings peace. Sometimes it's acceptance, without clarity, that truly sets you free. Let's go deeper. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself. When you seek closure from someone else, you're handing them power over your healing. You're saying, I can't move on until you fix this. But what if they never do? What if their silence is the answer? What if their refusal to acknowledge your pain says more about them than about what happened? This doesn't mean your pain isn't valid. It doesn't mean what they did was okay. It means you stop waiting for them to validate it in order for you to move forward. Because waiting for closure from the wrong person is its own kind of suffering. It keeps you emotionally tethered to someone who may have already let go. It traps you in a cycle of hoping, analyzing, and rehearsing, instead of releasing. So how do you find peace when closure is denied? You begin by giving yourself permission to heal without it. You say to yourself, I may never get the answers I want, but I can still give myself the compassion I need. You let go of the fantasy that one perfect conversation will make it all make sense. Because often, it won't. Even if they said sorry, even if they gave you every answer you asked for, it might still not feel like enough. Because closure isn't about the other person fixing the past. It's about you deciding to stop living inside it. This means letting go of certain questions. Why didn't they care? How could they treat me like that? Don't they feel guilty? These questions may never be answered, at least not in a way that satisfies your pain. But your healing doesn't need their permission. Your peace doesn't depend on their regret. Closure can look like writing the letter you'll never send. It can look like crying without apologizing for it. It can look like saying, "That hurt and I'll carry the scar, but I won't carry the weight of waiting anymore." It's not about pretending nothing happened. It's about deciding that what happened doesn't get to control what happens. Next. So if you're holding on, waiting for closure, ask yourself, what would it feel like to release this even without the ending I wanted? What would it feel like to stop needing them to make it right and start trusting myself to heal? Because sometimes the most powerful closure is silence. The moment you stop knocking on the door that's never going to open and walk away. Romanticizing the past. There are days when the present feels heavy. Your routine is predictable. Your goals feel distant. And life just doesn't hit the same way it once did. So what do? You drift backward. You start thinking about those days. That old relationship. That first apartment. That school year. That trip with friends. Suddenly, your memory feels warmer than your reality. This is the subtle seduction of romanticizing the past. The tendency to edit your memories into a version that feels safer, simpler, or sweeter than what you're living now. And at first, it's comforting. Nostalgia feels like a warm blanket. But stay there too long and it turns into a trap. Why? Because when you romanticize the past, you stop fully engaging with the present. You start believing the best already happened. You compare now to a highlight reel of what once was, and now always comes up short. You tell yourself, I was happier back then. Things were easier. People were better. I felt more alive. But here's the truth. Your memory is not a camera. It's a storyteller. And it edits heavily. You forget the confusion, the stress, the pain you carried during those times. You remember the laughter, but not the loneliness. You remember the kisses, but not the arguments. You remember the freedom, but not the fear of the unknown. Your brain is wired for rosy retrospection, a psychological bias where past events seem more positive than they actually were, simply because you've survived them. The pain has faded, but the story remains. And that story, if left unexamined, becomes a kind of emotional poison. Not because the past was bad, but because your relationship with it becomes unhealthy. You start believing you've peaked. You start chasing ghosts. You start feeling like everything now is gray because the past was golden. But the truth is, you are not meant to live and rewind. The people who left your life did so for a reason or a season. The chapters you close were stepping stones, not final destinations. The person you were back then, you've outgrown them in ways you can't even see clearly yet. You romanticize the past because the present feels uncertain. But uncertainty is where growth lives. It's where your real story is unfolding. Here's the shift. The past isn't meant to be a place you move back into it. It's meant to be a place you occasionally visit to see how far you've come. You can miss moments without needing to relive them. You can love what was without losing what is. You can honor your story without being trapped in one chapter. Ask yourself this. Am I remembering what actually was or just how I wish it felt? What parts of the past am I ignoring to make it seem perfect? Because healing begins when you stop chasing the fantasy version of yesterday and start facing the reality and potential of today, that you don't need to go backward to feel alive again. You just need to show up for what's in front of you, even if it's awkward, uncertain, or quiet. This present moment might not have the glow of nostalgia yet, But one day, this will become the past you'll miss too, the version of you. Reading this, feeling, growing, learning, you're in it, even if you can't see it yet. So don't get stuck in yesterday's dream. Create a new one now. Not because the past wasn't good, but because you're still becoming. Approval addiction. You post something and refresh the screen, watching the likes trickle in. You overthink a message before sending it, not because you don't know what you want to say, but because you want to be liked. You say yes when you want to say no. You laugh when you don't find it funny. You shape-shift, subtly, depending on who you're around. You're not fake, you're just afraid. Afraid of disapproval. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of being rejected. This is the quiet but powerful grip of approval addiction. The need for external validation to feel internally okay. And it runs deeper than just wanting to be liked. It's about survival. Because at some point in your life, approval may have felt like safety. Maybe your worth was tied to your performance. Maybe love was conditional. Maybe your voice was only heard when it pleased others. So you learn, if I make people happy, I'll be okay. But here's the cost. In chasing approval, you slowly lose yourself. You start abandoning your boundaries, your voice, your authenticity, just to keep others comfortable. You water yourself down so you don't risk being too much. You become who they want you to be, and then wonder why you feel invisible. Let's go deeper. Approval addiction is often driven by the fear that if people don't like you, you're not enough. It's the belief that your worth is fragile, something that can be granted or taken away by others' opinions. So you perform. You perfect. You play nice. But it's never enough, is it? Because the more you rely on approval, the more you need it. The highs get shorter. The lows get deeper. And worst of all, even when people do approve of you, you don't fully believe it, because they're not really seeing you. They're seeing the version you've edited for them. You crave connection, but you're offering a mask. You crave love, but you're presenting a filtered self. And deep down, you fear that if people knew the real you, unpolished, unfiltered, unperforming, they'd walk away. But what if the opposite is true? What if your realness is the very thing that could draw the right people in? The people who love you not despite your authenticity, but because of it. What if the validation you're chasing will never feel fulfilling, because what you actually crave is self-approval? Here's the shift. You don't need to be universally liked to be deeply worthy. You don't need to shrink to fit into rooms where you can't breathe. You don't need to agree with everyone to be respected. Say it with me. Approval is a bonus, not a necessity. When you start validating yourself, when you say, I trust my voice, my truth, my path, the need for outside approval begins to loosen. That doesn't mean you become rude or dismissive. It means you stop bending backward for people who wouldn't do the same for you. It means you start living aligned with your values, not just their expectations. Try this practice. Before you post, speak, or decide, ask, am I doing this because it's true for me, or because I think it'll make them like me? If it's the latter, pause. That doesn't mean don't do it. It means know why you're doing it. Awareness is power. And most of all, remind yourself that disapproval is not death. You will survive someone misunderstanding you. You will survive a frown, an unfollow, a quiet room. Because the peace of being true to yourself is always louder than the noise of being liked by everyone else. Let go of the performance. Let go of the pressure. Let go of needing everyone to clap. And start clapping for yourself. Fear of missing out. You're scrolling through your feed, and there it is, a party you weren't invited to, a group trip you missed, an event that looks like everyone is having the time of their life without you. And suddenly, your chest tightens. You feel left out, behind, disconnected. Even if you were perfectly content just moments ago. This is FOMO, the fear of missing out, and it's one of the most powerful and quiet emotional drains of the modern age. It's not just about events or opportunities. FOMO runs deeper. It's the fear that your life isn't measuring up, that other people are experiencing something better, richer, or more exciting, and that you're being left behind. And it doesn't need to be true to feel real. Even if you're surrounded by love, even if you're working on your dreams, even if your life is full of meaning, FOMO can still creep in and convince you that you're missing something essential. Let's unpack it. FOMO is not about the event. It's about insecurity. It's the fear that your path isn't good enough. It's the belief that meaning exists somewhere else, always, outside of where you are. And technology amplifies that fear. Social media isn't a window into reality. It's a highlight reel, edited with filters, timed for attention, built to provoke envy. You're comparing your behind the scenes with someone else's best moment of the month and calling it fair. You see their smiles, you hear their laughter, you read their captions about unforgettable nights, but you don't see the fights before the photo. You don't see the loneliness behind the scenes. You don't see the exhaustion after the performance. FOMO lies to you. It tells you they're living more than you. They're winning. You're losing. If you were just in a different place with different people, you'd finally feel alive. But here's the truth. There is no perfect elsewhere. Everywhere you go, you take yourself with you. And if you're constantly chasing what's out there, you'll never feel grounded in what's right here. Let's go deeper. FOMO thrives when you're disconnected from your values. When you're unsure what really matters to you, other people's choices start to look more appealing. You borrow their dreams. You copy their experiences. You live on their timeline. And then wonder why you still feel empty. But fulfillment doesn't come from being everywhere. It comes from being aligned. From choosing a life that feels right, not one that looks good. You don't need to be in every room. You don't need to attend every party. You don't need to say yes to every invite. You just need to trust that your no is creating space for a deeper yes. The antidote to FOMO isn't more activity, it's more presence. Try this when you feel the fear of missing out. Pause. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid I'm missing? Then ask, am I truly unhappy with my life, or just temporarily seduced by the illusion of theirs? And then return. Return to your values. Return to your goals. Return to the people, places, and rituals that root you. You don't need to be everywhere to belong. You don't need to have everything to feel complete. And you don't need to chase noise to feel alive. Because often what you think you're missing is already within reach. But you can't see it if your eyes are always wandering. So next time FOMO shows up, smile. Not because it's true, but because it reminds you to come home to yourself. Catastrophizing the future. You wake up with a strange headache and suddenly think, what if it's something serious? You send a message and don't get an immediate reply. Did I say something wrong? Are they mad? You make one small mistake at work and instantly imagine getting fired, losing everything, and ending up completely alone. This is not just overthinking. This is catastrophizing the future, the mental habit of imagining worst-case scenarios and reacting to fears that haven't and might never happen. And the scariest part? It feels real. Your heart races. Your stomach knots. Your brain enters what-if overdrive. You start living in a future that hasn't arrived and treating it like it's already here. Why do we do this? Because the brain is a prediction machine. It constantly scans for danger, not to make you miserable, but to protect you. But when this system is overactive, it doesn't just predict possible danger. It assumes the worst outcome is the most likely. It's trying to prepare you, but ends up paralyzing you. Let's go deeper. Catastrophizing often starts in childhood or during periods of instability. Maybe you grew up in an unpredictable home. Maybe one time the worst did happen, and your brain learned to anticipate pain so it wouldn't be caught off guard again. So now, even small uncertainties can trigger full-blown mental spirals. And the process is fast. A single negative thought sparks anxiety. Anxiety convinces you something bad is coming. That fear fuels more thoughts, images, scenarios, and your nervous system reacts as if it's already happening. This kind of thinking robs you of peace. You struggle to relax even in good moments. You sabotage opportunities before they begin. You feel emotionally exhausted, not because of real events, but because of imagined disasters. And here's what's even worse. Your brain doesn't distinguish much between imagined danger and real danger. So your body starts releasing stress hormones, tightening your chest, clouding your judgment, all because of a thought. So how do you stop catastrophizing? You don't silence the thoughts, you question them. Next time your mind spins into worst-case mode, pause and ask, is this thought based on fact or fear? What else could be true? Has this kind of thought ever been wrong before? Even if this happened, could I handle it? Because here's the truth. You've survived every worst day of your life so far. You're more resilient than your anxious thoughts give you credit for. Now try this practice. Write down the catastrophic thought, then write 3 alternative outcomes that are less dramatic and more realistic. Breathe, recenter, return to the now, because catastrophizing is always about the future. And healing is always found in the present. You are not in danger right now. You are not your thoughts. You are not a psychic. Either your fears about the future are not facts about the future. Train your brain to sit in uncertainty without jumping to doom. Sometimes the text is just a late reply. Sometimes the mistake is just human. Sometimes the silence isn't rejection, it's rest. You don't need to live life flinching for a hit that may never come. Instead, you can build a new relationship with your future. Not as a battleground of what-ifs, but as a space of possibility. Because, just as disaster is possible, so is healing, so is breakthrough, so is peace, and chances are, the worst case, it won't happen. But even if it does, you'll face it then, not now. Right now, you deserve to breathe fully, deeply, without fear of shadows that haven't formed. You are safe in this moment. Let yourself be here. Binary thinking. You either win or lose. You're either a success or a failure. You're either good or bad, loved or unloved, right or wrong. If you've ever felt trapped in an all-or-nothing mindset, you've been caught in the web of binary thinking, the cognitive distortion that divides the world into extremes with no room in between. And while it might sound like a simple way to make sense of life, it actually makes life harder, because real life isn't black and white. It's messy, layered, full of nuance, a constant dance between both and not either or. Binary thinking, though, wants certainty. It wants labels. It wants simplicity. So it pushes you to box everything in. If you make a mistake, you're a failure. If someone disagrees with you, they're the enemy. If your relationship hits a rough patch, it must be doomed. If you're not feeling 100% motivated, you must be lazy. But that mindset doesn't just distort how you view the world. It distorts how you view yourself, and it creates shame. Because now, your identity is tied to perfection. One slip and you fall from grace in your own eyes. You go from I made a bad choice to I'm a bad person. Binary thinking doesn't leave space for learning, growth, or contradiction. It's rigid, and anything that doesn't fit into its narrow definitions gets rejected, including your own complexity. Let's go deeper. Why do we think this way? Because binary thinking gives the illusion of control. If the world is simple, we feel safer. If we can label people quickly, we can protect ourselves. If we can define ourselves in extreme terms, we don't have to wrestle with the discomfort of being imperfect, but evolving. For many, this mindset starts in childhood. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where you had to be good to be accepted, where failure wasn't met with compassion, but punishment or withdrawal. So your brain learned, to be safe, I must be perfect. There is no middle ground. But here's the truth. The middle is where life actually happens. You can be doing your best and still make mistakes. You can love someone deeply and have conflict. You can feel confident in one moment and insecure in the next. You can grieve and grow at the same time. When you reject the gray, you reject your own humanity. So how do you break free from binary thinking? Start by catching the language. Words like always, never, completely, totally, ruined, perfect. They're signals. When you catch yourself using them, ask, is this really true? Or am I simplifying something that's actually more complex? Next, practice holding paradox. Don't try saying things like, this was hard, but it taught me something. I messed up, but I'm still learning. They hurt me, but I can still wish them well from a distance. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm proud of how far I've come. These are not contradictions, they're truths existing side by side. Finally, give yourself permission to be unfinished. You are not a fixed point. You are a process. And processes aren't perfect. They evolve, they regress, they shift. You're not here to be perfectly right. You're here to become real. Let go of the need to be one thing. Let go of the pressure to always have the right answer, the perfect life, the correct identity. Let yourself be in between, because freedom isn't found in picking a side. It's in seeing the whole picture. You're not either or. You're both, and you're not all. Good or all bad. You're human. And the more you embrace that truth, the more compassion you can offer to others and to yourself. Living for the highlight reel. You're sitting in your room, exhausted from the week. You open your phone, and there it is. A friend is traveling again. Someone just got engaged. Another landed a dream job. Someone's body looks flawless. Another posted the video smiling, dancing, blowing, and even though you were fine just moments ago, now you feel less accomplished, less happy, less alive. You're not alone. This is the emotional weight of living for the highlight reel, when the story you tell the world becomes more important than the life you're actually living. And it's subtle. It doesn't always start as performs. Sometimes it begins with just wanting to share joy. But over time, if you're not careful, it can turn into a pressure. The pressure to curate your life in ways that are more about how it looks than how it feels. You stop asking, "Is this meaningful to me?" and start asking, "Will this look good online?" You don't even realize you're doing it, editing your moments, cropping your truth, filtering your experiences, until eventually your real life feels dull compared to the one on your feed. Let's go deeper. The problem with highlight reels isn't just comparison. It's disconnection. When you live for the image, you disconnect from your actual life. You become more focused on capturing moments than feeling them, more interested in how people react than how you truly connect. And what you post becomes not a reflection of you, but a performance for them. The truth, every smiling photo hides something. Behind the engagement ring might be months of uncertainty. Behind the vacation may be credit card debt. Behind the six-pack might be an eating disorder. Behind the happy caption might be silent suffering. But we don't post those parts because they're messy, because they're unflattering, because they're real. And so the cycle continues. We show the shine and hide the scars. We see others' best 5% and compare it to our unfiltered 95%. We feel behind in a race that doesn't exist. The result? Chronic dissatisfaction, emotional burnout, a feeling that life is happening elsewhere while we're stuck watching it through a screen. But here's the truth that sets you free. You don't owe the world a performance. You don't need to constantly prove you're happy, successful, or interesting. You don't need to make every sunset a post. You don't need to turn every moment into content. You're allowed to have private joy, quiet healing, unposted progress. You're allowed to exist without documenting it. Try this. Next time something beautiful happens, don't reach for your phone. Sit with it. Let it touch you, not just your camera roll. Feel it. Live it. Remember it, not for likes, but for you. Because some of the best moments can't be captured. They're not polished. They're not public. They're deeply personal, raw, intimate, and alive. And that's the kind of life worth building. Not one that looks amazing, but one that feels real. So ask yourself, if no one ever saw this, would it still matter to me? If the answer is yes, you're on the right track. Because a meaningful life doesn't need to be on display to be valuable. And your worth is not a number, not views, not likes, not comments. It's in your ability to show up fully for your life. not just the image of a dot. Let others chase the spotlight. You build something deeper, something quiet, something sacred, something true. Perfection paralysis. You've got the idea. You've got the vision. You know what needs to be done, but you don't move. You don't start, or maybe you start, but can't finish. Why? Because you're stuck in a mental loop that whispers, if I can't do it perfectly, maybe I shouldn't do it at all. This is perfection paralysis, the invisible barrier that freezes you in place, not because you're lazy, but because you're terrified of falling short. It's not about lack of motivation. It's not about being incapable. It's about fearing that anything less than perfect means failure, or worse, that you are a failure. Let's get honest. Perfectionism wears many masks, though it pretends to be ambition. It sounds like high standards. It looks like discipline. But at its core, it's fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of disappointment. Fear of not being enough. So instead of moving forward with imperfect steps, you wait. You overplan. You tweak. You procrastinate, not because you don't care, but because you care too much. And you tell yourself things like, I'll start when I have more time. I just need to fix one more thing. It's not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. But the truth, it will never be perfect. And waiting for perfection is a guaranteed way to never begin. Let's go deeper. Perfection paralysis often stems from childhood experiences where love or praise was tied to performance. Maybe you were celebrated only when you achieved. Maybe failure wasn't treated as a lesson, but as a character flaw. So you learned, to be safe, I must excel. To be worthy, I must be flawless. Now, as an adult, that pressure follows you. You attach your identity to outcomes. You don't see a bad draft, you see a broken self. You don't allow room for growth, only for results. But here's the irony. Nothing grows in perfection. Everything begins messy. Every masterpiece was once a sketch. Every expert was once a beginner fumbling through mistakes. Your fear of imperfection might be robbing the world of your voice, your art, your ideas, not because they're not good enough, but because you keep them locked behind a wall of impossible standards. So how do you break free? Start by redefining success. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for progress. Instead of seeking praise, seek practice. Don't ask yourself, what's the smallest imperfect step I can take right now? If I remove the pressure to impress, what would I do differently? What would I tell a friend who's scared to begin? And then begin, clumsily, boldly, with your hands shaking if they must. Because clarity doesn't come before action, it comes from action. You learn by doing. You grow by starting. You find your rhythm inside the mess, not outside of it. Perfection is not the goal. Presence is. Your worth isn't measured by how flawless your output is. It's in the courage to show up when nothing is guaranteed. And here's the truth no one tells you. The people you admire, they're not perfect. They're consistent. They failed more times than you've tried. They moved anyway. So give yourself permission to be messy, to start badly. 2. Be seen, incomplete, in progress, becoming. Because freedom isn't found in perfect timing. It's found in permission to begin. The identity trap. You say things like, I'm just not that kind of person. I've always been this way. That's just who I am. And at first it feels honest, like you're just stating facts about yourself. But beneath those words, there's a hidden cage, a set of invisible walls, a life being shaped and limited by a concept more powerful than you realize. This is the identity trap, the unconscious habit of confusing who you've been with who you are. It sounds like clarity, but really, it's restriction. It defines your comfort zone, and eventually it can become a self-imposed prison. Let's go deeper. Identity isn't just what you say you are. It's what you believe you are. And those beliefs shape everything. What you try, what you fear, what you allow, what you think you deserve. For example, if you believe, I'm not good at relationships, you'll subconsciously sabotage intimacy. If you believe, I'm not a disciplined person, you'll avoid routines. If you believe, I'm always the funny one, you may never allow yourself to be vulnerable. Even negative identities can feel safe because they're familiar. And familiarity, even when it hurts, often feels more comfortable than change. But here's the truth. You are not your patterns. You are not your past. You are not your worst day or even your best one. You are something deeper, a constantly evolving being with the ability to rewrite, rewire, and redefine. Your identity is not a label. It's a process. The problem is we live in a world that loves boxers. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Are you a leader or a follower? Are you creative or analytical? But people aren't boxers, they're oceans. They shift, they deepen, they hold contradictions. So when you trap yourself in a fixed identity, you kill off possibility. You start rejecting anything that doesn't match the role you think you're supposed to play. You stop evolving because you think you shouldn't evolve. You confuse authenticity with limitation. But being authentic doesn't mean staying the same. It means staying true to who you're becoming. So how do you escape the identity trap? Start by noticing the stories you repeat. What phrases do you always say about yourself? I'm always anxious. I'm just not good with money. I've never been consistent. That's just not me. Pause. And ask, is this who I am or just who I've been? Then, give yourself permission to change. Because real freedom comes when you stop defending your limitations. You don't owe consistency to an outdated version of yourself. You don't have to keep wearing the mask that once made you feel safe. You don't need to keep playing a role that no longer fits. Try this reframing. Instead of, I'm not that kind of person, say, I haven't practiced that skill yet. Instead of, that's just how I am, say, that's who I've been and I'm learning something new. Instead of, I've always failed at this, say, every failure was a lesson, not a sentence. Because identity isn't a brand, it's a becoming. It's fluid, expansive, messy, beautiful. And the moment you release who you think you're supposed to be, you make room for who you're meant to become. You're not stuck. You're just telling an old story. It's time to write a new one. I don't deserve better belief. You stay in the relationship even though it drains you. You tolerate a job that makes you feel invisible. You quiet your voice in rooms where you should be heard. And deep down, a thought keeps echoing quietly, but constantly. Maybe this is just what I deserve. This belief doesn't shout, it whispers. It hides behind your choices, your boundaries, your hesitation to reach higher. It convinces you to settle, not because it's right, but because it feels safe. This is the weight of the "I don't deserve better" belief. It's one of the most invisible prisons you can live in, because it's not always about what others say about you. It's what you've started to believe about yourself. And the cruel part, you don't even realize you've accepted it. It shows up in the way you say it's fine when it isn't, and how you downplay your needs, laugh off mistreatment, or work twice as hard just to feel halfway worthy. But where did this belief come from? Maybe someone in your past made you feel small. Maybe you learned early on that love was conditional, based on performance, silence, or compliance. Maybe you never saw a healthy example of boundaries, of self-worth, of people claiming more than survival. So you absorbed the message, I should be grateful for what I have, even if it hurts, even if it shrinks you, even if it keeps you in places that slowly break your spirit. But here's the truth you need to hear, not once, but over and over. Deserving better isn't about entitlement. It's about truth. You're not asking for too much when you want kindness, respect, rest, love, support. You're asking for the baseline of what every human being deserves. And yes, that includes you. The belief that you're somehow an exception, that others deserve peace and joy, but not you, is a lie. A lie that your past planted and your fear watered. And every time you act on that lie, you reinforce it. You stay. You settle. You shrink. You don't ask. You don't reach. You don't dream. Until eventually, even imagining better feels unrealistic. Like a fairy tale for other people, not for someone like you. But what if you challenge that belief? What if you ask yourself, gently but honestly, where did I learn that I'm only worthy of scraps? Who benefits when I believe I'm not allowed to ask for more? What if I tried just once to believe that I was made for more? Because you were, not because of how much you've achieved, not because of how good or useful or perfect you are, but simply because you're human, alive, breathing, becoming. You don't earn the right to deserve better. You reclaim it. It doesn't mean you abandon gratitude. It means you stop confusing gratitude with settling. You can be grateful for the lesson and know it's time to move on. You can honor where you came from and still decide that it's not where you want to stay. This belief that you don't deserve better is not yours to carry anymore. Let it go. Not all at once, maybe slowly, maybe with shaking hands, maybe through tears. But let it go anyway. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to heal, rise, and rewrite your story. You are not here to survive your life. You are here to live it. Rescuing others to avoid your own pain. You're always the one people call when they're falling apart. The fixer, the helper, the one who stays up late to talk them through their mess. Even when you're drowning in your own, you pride yourself on being there, being dependable, being strong. But quietly, when you're alone, you realize something strange. You've built your identity around healing others, while quietly ignoring the parts of you that are crying for attention. This is the quiet trap of rescuing others to avoid your own pain. It looks noble, it feels generous, it even earns you praise. But underneath, it's often an escape, a way to stay busy enough so you never have to sit with your own silence. A way to feel needed so you don't have to feel hollow. A way to look like you have it all together while quietly falling apart inside. Don't do it on purpose. You care deeply. But somewhere along the way, helping became a mask, a distraction, a substitute for the healing you never gave yourself. Let's go deeper. Often this dynamic starts in childhood. Maybe you had to be the strong one. Maybe you played peacemaker in a chaotic home. Maybe your needs came second or last, so you learned that the way to feel loved was to be useful. So now, in adulthood, that pattern repeats. You jump into crisis mode the moment someone struggles. You abandon your own boundaries. You say yes even when you're exhausted. You become so entwined in their healing, you forget about your own. Because deep down, it's safer to focus on fixing them than facing what's broken in you. Helping becomes control, and control feels safer than vulnerability. But here's what no one tells you. You can drown in someone else's storm while trying to be their lighthouse. You can lose yourself completely in the process of saving everyone else. And at some point you stop being a helper and start becoming a hostage to pain that was never yours to carry. Here's the truth. You are not responsible for everyone's healing. You are not their therapist, their savior, their parent. You can care deeply and still say, "This is not mine to fix." Because rescuing is often a form of avoidance. It's easier to pour into someone else's wounds than to look at your own. Easier to bandage their bleeding than to confront your quiet sadness. Easier to be needed than to admit that you need. But your pain doesn't disappear just because you avoid it. It waits. It simmers beneath the surface. And sometimes helping others becomes a way to delay the inevitable, your own healing. So what? Nah, you don't have to stop caring. But you do need to start including yourself in that care. Need to ask, am I helping because they need me or because I'm avoiding me? Is this compassion or is it codependency? Am I fixing them because I don't believe I'm worthy if I'm not useful? You deserve space to unravel, to rest, to cry, to say, I don't have it in me today. Not because you're selfish, but because you're human. You deserve relationships where you're not the emotional janitor, where your presence isn't based on your ability to fix everything, where you're loved not for what you do, but for who you are. And most of all, you deserve healing that starts with you. Let them walk their path, you walk yours. And trust that when you choose your own healing, the world doesn't fall apart. Sometimes it starts to make sense. Mental time travel. You're sitting in a quiet room, maybe trying to rest, maybe trying to focus. But your mind has other plans. Don't suddenly you're reliving that awkward conversation from last week, replaying the moment you didn't speak up years ago. Rewinding all the way back to that time you messed up again and again. Or maybe you're leaping into the future, imagining all the ways things might go wrong, feeling the anxiety of a situation that hasn't even happened, living out fears, failures, regrets, none of which are real right now. This is mental time travel, and it's one of the most exhausting tricks your brain plays on you. You're not physically moving, But emotionally, you're everywhere but here. And the worst part? It feels involuntary. Like you've lost the remote control to your own mind. You bounce between the past and the future like a prisoner pacing between two ends of a cell. Regret pulls you backward. Fear pushes you forward. And the present moment, the only place where life actually happens, becomes invisible. Let's unpack this. Mental time travel isn't always bad. It's part of being human. It allows us to plan, reflect, learn. But when it becomes compulsive, when your mind drags you into memories or imagined disasters over and over, it becomes toxic. You begin to over-identify with your past, believing that what happened is who you are. Or you obsess over your future, believing that unless everything is controlled, everything will fall apart. Either way, you're not living. You're existing in a loop, rehearsing pain instead of releasing it. But why does your mind do this? Because the brain wants a resolution. It revisits the past to fix what can't be undone. It jumps to the future to avoid surprise or hurt. It means well, but it doesn't work because no amount of mental reruns can rewrite history. No amount of forecasting can guarantee safety. All it really does is steal the peace you could be feeling right now. How many moments have slipped by while you were stuck reliving something you can't change? How many sunsets, conversations, meals, or moments of rest were consumed by ghosts of what if and what was? Here's the truth. You can't heal in the past or prepare forever for the future. You can only breathe here. Now, don't. So how do you stop? You won't always, but you can interrupt the pattern. You can train yourself gently to return. Start with your breath. Feel your body. Look around. Say, I am here. Remind yourself, that moment you're reliving, it's gone. That fear about tomorrow, it's fiction until proven otherwise. But this moment is heartbeat. This breath, this awareness, it's real. It's yours, and if you stay in it long enough, something incredible happens. Your nervous system softens. Your thoughts quiet. You feel yourself coming back, like you've been underwater. And now, finally, you're rising to the surface. Because life isn't lived in memory or prediction. It's lived in presence. No, the past doesn't define you. And the future doesn't control you. You are not a character in either, unless you choose to be. So come back. Come home to your breath. Come home to your body. Come home to now. Because now is where healing lives. Now is where peace begins. Now is where you remember who you are, not as a victim of your story, but as its conscious author. Thinking success is linear, but you were told the story early on, even if no one ever said it directly. Work hard, stay focused, do the right things in the right order, and success will follow. Like climbing a staircase, one step at a time, no detours, no setbacks, just steady progress toward the top. But then you entered the real world, and the steps didn't make sense. Sometimes you moved forward and ended up backward. Sometimes you gave everything you had and still fell short. Sometimes success looked close, then vanished like a mirage, and quietly a painful thought settled in. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe I'm behind. Maybe I'm not good enough. But here's the truth they don't teach you in school. Success is not linear. It never was. It's not a staircase. It's a tangled path, a maze, a series of false starts, backtracks, leaps, crashes, and restarts. Sometimes you grow fastest when nothing seems to be working. Sometimes the failure is the very thing that moves you forward. And sometimes standing still is the bravest move. Of all, we live in a world obsessed with speed and upward momentum. We post our highlights. We celebrate breakthroughs. But what we rarely talk about is the middle, the stuck, the seasons where everything feels blurry and lost. Yet that's where real transformation happens, not in the clear, confident moments, but in the ones where you have no map and still keep going. Success, real success, isn't just about goals or results. It's about resilience. It's about showing up when it's hard, when you're doubting yourself, when no one's clapping. And it's also about redefining what success even means. Because maybe for you, success isn't the corner office. Maybe it's having the courage to walk away from something that doesn't feel right. Maybe it's choosing rest over burnout. Maybe it's healing a pattern that's haunted your family for generations. That kind of success doesn't always get celebrated on social media, but it's the kind that changes lives, starting with yours. Let's also be honest. The belief in a linear path often leads to burnout. When you think success should be a straight climb, every detour feels like failure. You rush, you force, you compare. You feel ashamed for not being there yet, wherever there is. But what if every pause has purpose? What if this setback is preparation? What if your timing is not off? It's unfolding in a way that makes room for your becoming, not just your achieving. You don't need to be ahead. You don't need to follow someone else's timeline. You need to listen to your rhythm, your values, your truth. Because you are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You are on a path no one has walked before, and that path doesn't have to be linear to be worthy. So release the pressure to climb in a straight line. Let your journey twist. Let it teach you. Let it make you slow down so you can hear what really matters. Because the best things, they take time. They take detours. They take becoming someone you weren't before. And that right there is the point. Emotional reasoning. You wake up feeling anxious, and without even realizing it, you decide that something must be wrong. You feel unwanted, so you assume people must be pulling away. You feel like a failure, so you convince yourself that you are one. This is the subtle trap of emotional reasoning, a mental shortcut where your feelings become your facts. And it's powerful, because it bypasses logic. It doesn't ask for evidence. It doesn't check for truth. It simply says, I feel it, so it must be real. If you feel rejected, it must mean you're unlovable. If you feel hopeless, it must mean nothing will change. If you feel scared, it must mean you're in danger, even if you're perfectly safe. Your emotions become the lens you see the world through. But here's what no one teaches you. Feelings are valid, but not always accurate. They're messengers, not masters. They're signals, not stories. They point to something happening inside you, but not always to what's true outside you. Let's go deeper. Emotional reasoning often starts early. If you grew up in an environment where your emotions weren't named, validated, or held with care, you learned to navigate life based on instinct, not interpretation. So when something didn't feel right, you assumed it wasn't right. When you felt insecure, you assumed you were unworthy. You never learned to say, this is what I'm feeling, But let's explore why. Instead, feelings became identities. You stopped separating the emotion from the truth. But here's the thing. Feelings are like weather. They change. They pass. They can cloud your vision, but they don't rewrite the landscape underneath. Feeling anxious doesn't mean danger is present. Feeling sad doesn't mean you're broken. Feeling unloved doesn't mean no one cares, and it just means something inside you is asking to be noticed, heard, understood. Held. The danger of emotional reasoning is that it traps you in false narratives. You don't call your friend because you feel like they don't want to hear from you. You don't try for that new job because you feel like you're not qualified. You don't set boundaries because you feel like you're being dramatic. And so, your feelings, which were meant to be processed, become a cage. So how do you break free? You start by noticing the moment a feeling becomes a stored. I feel like a burden. Pause. Is that a feeling or a belief? Ask yourself, what evidence supports this? Is there another way to interpret what I'm feeling? Would I say this to someone I love? You practice creating space between stimulus and story. You learn to say, I feel anxious, but that doesn't mean I'm unsafe. I feel overwhelmed, but I am still capable. I feel unworthy, but I know my worth isn't based on this one moment. This is the work. Learning to witness your emotions without worshiping them. Letting them pass through you, not define you. Because here's what's real. You can feel uncertain and still be on the right path. You can feel broken and still be healing. You can feel afraid and still take the next step. Your emotions are powerful, yes, but they don't get to hold the pen. You do. You get to pause. You get to challenge the story. You get to feel deeply without letting those feelings decide your destiny. Because clarity comes when you learn to sit with your emotions, not surrender to them. If I try, I might fail. Dilemma. There's an idea in your mind, a dream, a change you've wanted for a long time. Maybe it's a career move. Maybe it's healing a relationship. Maybe it's creating something deeply personal, a business, a book, a new way of living. And every time you get close to starting, something stops you. Not a lack of desire, not a lack of talent, not even time, just a quiet, heavy thought. What if I try and I fail? This is the paralyzing loop of the if I try, I might fail dilemma. It's not laziness, it's fear. Fear of disappointment. Fear of being seen as inadequate. Fear of confirming the story you secretly tell yourself that maybe you're not good enough. So instead of risking failure, you avoid the attempt. You stay in the comfort of maybe, because maybe still holds the illusion of potential. But if you try and it doesn't work, now it's real. Now there's evidence that feels terrifying. But here's the truth. You don't hear enough. Avoiding failure doesn't protect your self-worth. It just guarantees regret. Because the real danger isn't falling, it's staying stuck. The real failure isn't trying and stumbling. It's never knowing who you could have been had you just begun. Let's look deeper. This fear is often rooted in perfectionism, in a belief system that says your value is tied to your outcomes. That success defines you, and failure diminishes you. So you think, if I don't try, I won't fail. If I don't fail, I won't feel worthless. But you know what else happens when you don't try? You don't grow. You don't learn. You don't move. You trade risk for safety, and your soul knows it. The irony is this: the people you admire, the ones who've done incredible things, didn't get there by avoiding failure. They moved through it. They stumbled. They fell. They learned, adjusted, and rose again. Trying doesn't mean you'll win, but it means you're in the game. It means you have a chance to become someone new, someone braver, stronger, more. It's okay to be afraid. That just means you care. But let the fear ride in the back seat, not take the wheel. Trying and failing isn't the end of the road. It's a step forward. Every failure teaches you something you couldn't learn by standing still. So ask yourself, what's more painful, the risk of failing or the weight of never knowing? Choose the one that grows you. You don't have to leap all at once. Start small, one imperfect step, one honest effort, one decision to show up anyway. Let failure be your teacher, not your jailer. Let effort be your proof that you believed in yourself enough to try. Because in the end, it's not the outcome that defines you. It's the courage to move despite the fear. And that's where your real strength lives. Negativity bias. You could receive 5 compliments in a day and 1 small criticism. And it's the criticism that lingers. You could have a week of progress and 1 bad moment, and it's the bad moment that echoes in your mind. Why? Because your brain is wired to protect you, not to please you. And in its effort to keep you safe, it gives more weight to danger, pain, and threat, even when those threats are emotional, not physical. This is the psychological lens called negativity bias. It's not a flaw. It's a survival tool. Back in ancient times, those who remembered threats, like the sound of a predator or a poisonous plant, lived longer. So your brain evolved to scan for danger, hold on to pain, and overanalyze the negative. But in modern life, that same mechanism doesn't always serve you, because now it's not tigers, it's tone of voice. It's not famine, it's a disapproving glance. It's not exile, it's a text at what unanswered. And still, your brain goes, that might hurt me. Better focus on it. Better replay it. So even in a day filled with good things, you fixate on the one thing that went wrong. Even when life is mostly okay, your mind leans into the shadows, just in case. The result? You feel unsafe, unseen, or unworthy. Not because life is bad, but because your perception has been tilted toward threat. Let's go deeper. Negativity bias can sabotage your self-esteem, your relationships, your ability to feel joy. It convinces you to prepare for disappointment before it even arrives. It fuels anxiety by asking what if over and over again. It tells you that you're just being realistic, when really you're being distorted, and perhaps most painfully, it keeps you from receiving. You push away praise. You doubt kindness. You brace yourself for the worst and miss the moment that's already good. But what if you could shift the weight? Not by denying the negative, but by not letting it run the whole show. You can rewire your focus. You can teach your brain to notice what's right. It's not easy, but it's possible. Start by holding on longer to the good. When something beautiful happens, a kind word, a quiet moment, a moment of courage, pause, let it sink in. Replay that instead of the pain. Feel it in your body. Let it expand. Research shows it takes longer for positive experiences to embed into memory. Negative ones imprint instantly. So if joy is like rain, let it soak. Don't run from it. Also, challenge your interpretations. Not everything painful is a warning. Not every off moment is rejection. Not every silence is judgment. Sometimes the brain exaggerates. Sometimes it lies. You don't have to believe every fear it throws at you. You can be curious instead of convinced. You can ask, what else might be true? Because maybe you're not being excluded. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe you're not failing. Maybe you're learning. Maybe you're not behind. Maybe you're right on time. And maybe, just maybe, the world isn't as harsh as your brain tells you. It is. Your mind is trying to protect you. Think it, then lead it. Because you're not in a jungle anymore. You're in your life. And it's time you learned to trust the light, even when the dark still whispers. Believing you're behind in life. It starts when you scroll through social media. Someone's announcing a promotion. Another just bought a house. Someone else is getting married, launching a brand, traveling the world. And without meaning to, you feel a quiet ache. A whisper inside that says, I should be further by now. Everyone's moving forward, and I'm stuck. I'm behind. This is one of the most painful illusions we carry, the belief that life is a race, and you're losing. But let's pause right there. Behind who? According to what timeline? There's no universal clock ticking over your head. There's no one-size-fits-all blueprint for how life is supposed to unfold. Yet so many of us carry this invisible pressure, as if there's a checklist we must follow, and if we're late, we've failed. But who created that checklist? Who said, you have to have it all figured out by 25? Who decided that success, marriage, kids, wealth, peace, all must come in tidy, timely packages? Here's the truth. You're not behind. You're on your own path. And your path isn't broken just because it looks different. Your timing isn't wrong just because it doesn't match someone else's. Your value isn't diminished just because someone else got there first. Life is not a conveyor belt. It's not a series of checkpoints. It's a deeply personal unfolding. Let's look deeper. The belief that you're behind usually stems from comparison. Not just with others, but with your own expectations. The version of you that thought, by now I'll be, and when reality doesn't match that imagined future, disappointment turns into shame. But you know what that imagined version of you didn't account for? Your pain, your detours, your growth, the heartbreaks that cracked you open, the losses that reshaped your priorities, the healing you had to do before you could move forward. You're not behind, you're becoming. And becoming is messy. It doesn't always look productive. It doesn't always look impressive, but it's real. It's rich. It's human. Every pause you took to protect your peace, that wasn't failure. That was self-respect. Every time you started over, that wasn't being lost. That was bravery. Every day you survived when it would have been easier to give up, that was strength. So let go of the myth that you're late. You're not running behind. You're right on schedule. For your life, not theirs. Not the internet's, yours. If you need to move slow, move slow. If your journey has taken detours, honor them. If you're still figuring it out, that's not shameful. That's honest. And let's be real. Some of the people you're comparing yourself to, they're faking confidence. They're carrying their own secret doubts. They're looking at you and thinking they're behind. We're all carrying invisible timelines, racing toward a finish line that doesn't exist. So breathe. You're not late. You're not broken. You're not a failure. You're exactly where you need to be to learn what you need to learn, to become who you're becoming, to live your life, not someone else's highlight reel. Let this be your reminder. You are not behind. You are building at your own pace, in your own way, and that is more than enough. The inversion reflex. You receive a compliment, and your first reaction is to deflect it. Someone shows care, and you question their intention. An opportunity shows up, and you talk yourself out of it. It's not that you don't want to feel good. It's not that you don't crave love or growth or confidence. It's that the moment something positive happens, your mind flips it upside down. This is the inversion reflex, the unconscious habit of turning good things into something negative. And it happens faster than you realize. You hear you're amazing at what you do, and your reflex is, they're just being polite. You hear you look great today, and your reflex is, they must be joking. You feel proud of yourself, then immediately undercut it with, don't get cocky. Why do we do this? Because somewhere deep down, we've learned that it's safer to be prepared for disappointment than to receive something good and risk losing it. We've been conditioned to be suspicious of joy, to brace for the fume, to view peace as temporary, to think if I don't celebrate, I won't be hurt when it's taken away. But that mindset isn't protection, it's punishment. Every time you invert something positive, you're training your brain to distrust happiness, to see kindness as manipulation, to treat success as a setup, to label confidence as arrogance. You become so good at guarding your heart that you stop letting anything in. Let's go even deeper. This reflex often forms as a defense mechanism in childhood. Maybe praise came with pressure. Maybe good moments were followed by sudden chaos. Maybe joy felt fleeting, so you learned to expect the other shoe to drop. So now, your nervous system reacts to good news the same way it reacts to bad, with fear, with tension, with disbelief. You become emotionally allergic to your own growth. And without knowing it, you begin to sabotage anything that feels too good to be true. But here's the truth. Not everything good is a trap. Not every pie in the word is manipulation. Not every breakthrough is followed by a breakdown. Sometimes things just go well. Sometimes people really mean it. Sometimes you deserve to feel proud, loved, successful, happy. And the moment you stop inverting every positive experience, you start receiving life in full color. So what can you do? First, notice the pattern. Every time something good happens and you catch yourself minimizing it, pause. Ask, what if I let this land? What if I believed this even for a moment? What if I didn't turn this into a threat? Then breathe. Feel the compliment. Soak in the wind. Let the love in, even if it feels unfamiliar. You don't need to earn every drop of joy. You don't need to analyze every moment of peace. You don't need to treat every good thing as a warning sign. It's okay to smile and not brace for impact. It's okay to feel proud without proving anything. It's okay to feel good and not explain it away, Because here's what's real. You deserve to receive without suspicion. You deserve to grow without guilt. You deserve to feel joy without turning it into a liability. Undo the reflex. Reclaim the good. Let yourself experience life as it is, not as you fear it will be. The knowledge spiral. You start reading, learning, watching, absorbing, book after book, podcast after podcast, insight after insight. You gather knowledge like oxygen, hoping that if you just understand enough, life will finally make sense. But, strangely, the more you learn, the more overwhelmed you feel. Instead of clarity, you spiral. Instead of action, you hesitate. Instead of feeling empowered, you start feeling behind. This is the trap of the knowledge spiral, the illusion that if you just learn a little more, you'll finally be ready to heal, ready to grow, ready to act. But the truth is, sometimes, knowledge becomes a cage, not because it's wrong, but because it replaces experience. You consume and consume, hoping that wisdom will protect you from risk, pain, or uncertainty. You fall into a loop where learning becomes the performance, and living becomes the thing you keep postponing. It starts innocently, a desire to be better, to grow. You read about boundaries, but don't set any. You study emotional regulation, but avoid feeling your feelings. You learn the science of confidence, but still shrink in real conversations. And eventually you start believing a dangerous lie, that if you're still struggling, it must mean you haven't learned enough yet. But that's not true. You're not broken because you still feel lost after reading 10 books. You're not failing because you still fall into old habits after every insightful podcast. You're human, and humans don't change through knowledge alone. We change through practice. Knowledge is only powerful when it meets action. Otherwise, it's like reading about swimming while standing on the shore, afraid to touch the water. You don't become a better swimmer by memorizing strokes. You become one by jumping in, flailing, learning, adjusting, and trying again. What's happening in the spiral is this. Your mind is searching for control. It wants a guarantee. It wants to know that if you study enough, you won't be hurt again. But healing doesn't work like that. Growth isn't predictable. Life isn't safe just because you understand it. Eventually, you have to stop reading and start living. You have to risk getting it wrong. You have to speak the boundary even if your voice shakes. You have to try the new way of being, even if it feels foreign. You have to trust that who you are is enough, not because you've learned everything, but because you're willing to learn through experience. There's a wisdom that only life can teach, the kind that only comes when you show up raw, uncertain, imperfect, and still try. So here's your invitation. Pause the spiral. Put down the guide. Take a breath and take a step, not because you're fully ready, but because you're ready enough to begin. And in the beginning, that's all that matters. The anti-self hypothesis. There's a voice in your mind that's always whispering. It doesn't scream. It doesn't shout. It doesn't even sound angry. It just quietly repeats one message. You're not enough. Sometimes it says it outright. Sometimes it hides behind subtler lines. You don't deserve that. You're too much. You'll always mess it up. You've lived with it so long, you don't even question it anymore. It sounds like the truth. It feels like your own voice. But what if it's not? What if it's something deeper? A blueprint stitched into you long ago, not born from truth, but from pain. This is the foundation of the anti-self hypothesis, the belief, conscious or unconscious, that who you are is fundamentally flawed, that you are not just someone who makes mistakes, but someone who is a mistake, that no matter how much you grow, succeed, or are loved, deep down, you are not worthy of it, and because of this you live your life trying to prove you're good, while secretly fearing you're not. It's a mental and emotional contradiction. You want success, but when you get close, you sabotage it. You crave connection, but when someone gets too near, you pull away. You long to be seen, but wear masks so no one sees too much, because if they saw the real you, they might confirm your worst fear, that you are unlovable, effective, wrong. But here's the truth no one told you. That fear, that voice, that belief, it is not you. It's his survival strategy. It came from somewhere. Maybe from a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe from bullying or trauma or chronic invalidation. Maybe from growing up in a world that constantly asked you to be something else. So you built a false self, a version of you that could be accepted, the achiever, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the quiet one, the funny one. But beneath that role, the pain never left. You split yourself, the acceptable self on the outside, and the real you buried underneath. And now, as an adult, the anti-self whispers every time you get close to joy. This isn't real. They'll leave if they find out who you really are. You don't deserve this. And so you shrink, you stay quiet, you self-sabotage. Not because you want to fail, but because success doesn't feel safe. Because somewhere, you decided that the real you isn't worthy, and anything good must belong to someone else. But what if that's a lie? What if the anti-self was never true, just loud? What if you don't need to fix yourself? You need to reclaim yourself. You were never too much. You were never too broken. You were never undeserving. You were simply told through words, actions, or silence that your authentic self wasn't acceptable. But they were wrong. You are not an accident. You are not a mistake. You are a whole being, worthy of love, peace, joy, belonging. Not when you fix yourself. Not when you prove yourself. Now, as you are. And yes, healing takes time. Undoing the anti-self hypothesis means unlearning years of self-rejection. It means sitting with the voice and choosing not to obey it. It means feeling unworthy and still taking up space. It means hearing the whisper and still speaking your truth. Because the real you, the one underneath the fear, the mask, the shame, that you is worthy, that you is enough, and that you is waiting for permission to return home. The reverse spotlight. There's a moment when you walk into a room, and even if no one looks at you, you feel like everyone's watching. You say something in a group and immediately second-guess how it landed. You send a text and obsess over the delay in the reply. You replay conversations long after they've ended, convinced you said the wrong thing. This isn't vanity. This isn't ego. It's something much more subtle and much more exhausting. It's the reverse spotlight. In a normal spotlight. You shine. You're seen, noticed, and acknowledged. But the reverse spotlight isn't about being seen. It's about assuming you're always being judged. It's about walking through the world with a distorted mirror that makes everything about you even when it's not. You spill your drink and feel like a disaster. You fumble your words and assume people think you're dumb. You say no and believe they'll never speak to you again. What's strange is that rationally, others aren't thinking about you that much. You've heard the quote, "People are too busy worrying about themselves to worry about you." But it doesn't land. Because in your body, in your mind, you still feel exposed, scrutinized, at risk. So where does this come from? Often it's rooted in experiences where being seen meant being judged. Maybe you were criticized harshly. Maybe you were punished for expressing yourself. Maybe your emotions, your mistakes, your needs were made into a spectacle. So now attention doesn't feel neutral. It feels dangerous. And even when attention isn't present, your mind simulates it. You imagine their eyes. You imagine their thoughts. You become both performer and audience in a play that no one else is watching, but you can't turn it off. The result? You become hyper-aware, constantly managing how you appear. You overthink small things. You suppress your truth. You hold yourself to impossible standards, not to shine, but to avoid shame. The reverse spotlight keeps you living on edge, as if everyone is waiting for you to mess up. And over time, this robs you of spontaneity, connection, and joy. But here's what's real. People are not analyzing you the way you think they are. They're not dissecting your every word. They're not tracking your every flaw. Most people are absorbed in their own reverse spotlight, just trying to survive their own self-consciousness. So what if, just for a moment, you stepped out of the imagined spotlight? What if you allowed yourself to be seen as you are, not as you fear? What if you trusted that mistakes don't define you, and that being human is not a crime? You don't need to perform to be worthy. You don't need to impress to be accepted. You don't need to control perception to be safe. Your worth is not contingent on flawless execution. Your value is not conditional on how well you're received. You can be awkward and still be loved. You can be unsure and still be respected. You can show up imperfectly and still be enough. That the reverse spotlight is a lie, a habit of the mind that says you're always on display. But the world isn't a stage. It's a place to be real, to connect, to breathe, to exist without performance. So exhale. You're allowed to be here, as you are. No spotlight needed. The Benjamin Franklin effect. It sounds like a paradox at first, that someone will like you more after doing a favor for you, not because you helped them, but because they helped you. That's the strange and beautiful power of the Benjamin Franklin effect. The story goes that Franklin, facing criticism from a political rival, asked to borrow a rare book from the man's library. The rival, flattered by the request, obliged. Franklin thanked him, returned the book, and from that moment on, the man began to treat Franklin with warmth, respect, and eventual friendship. What happened? When we do something kind for someone, our brains start to rationalize why. And the easiest answer becomes, I must like them. Because we're not just thinking beings, we're meaning makers. We want our actions and beliefs to match. So if I do something nice for you, then I must see you as worthy of that kindness, even if I didn't before. That's the reverse logic of the Benjamin Franklin effect. But this isn't just about social strategy. It's about rewiring how we build connection, break bias, and deepen trust with others and with ourselves. Don't think about how often we believe we have to earn someone's love or impress them. More intimacy than always being the giver. Vulnerability works both ways, asking for help, receiving support, allowing someone to invest in you emotionally, mentally, or physically. These acts don't diminish your strength. They amplify your bond, because when someone helps you, they also begin to care about you. Not because you owe them something, but because helping you made them feel closer to you. Now, this effect doesn't mean manipulating people. It doesn't mean being passive or overly dependent. It means understanding that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is receive. To say, I need you. To say, can you show up for me? To say, I don't have to carry this alone. And here's where it turns inward. Apply the same principle to yourself. Instead of waiting until you love yourself to do kind things for yourself, try doing kind things now. Let your brain catch up. Let your heart believe it after your body feels it. The more acts of compassion you extend to yourself, the more you begin to believe you're worth it. The more you care for yourself, the more the story of who you are begins to shift. It's not fake. It's foundational. Because sometimes the path to love isn't waiting for the feeling. It's creating the pattern that leads there. That's the beauty of the Benjamin Franklin effect. That by giving, we grow closer. That by receiving, we deepen trust. And that by acting with intention, even before the belief is solid, we build bridges between ourselves and others. You are worthy of love, not just because of what you do, but because of who you are. And every time someone helps you, every time you help someone else, you're not just exchanging effort. You're exchanging connection. You're saying, we matter to each other. If this video made you think, reflect, or breathe a little easier, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment sharing your favorite insight, and let's keep this space growing. We're building more than just videos here. We're building clarity, healing, and a new way of thinking. Turn on notifications, because what's coming next might just be the breakthrough you didn't know you'd need to. See you in the next session. Until then, keep showing up for your growth, for your peace, for you.